Hello all, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. And today we're tackling what is actually the inspiration of this entire run, Eventide Island. Now, love it or hate it, Eventide Island is a unique shrine within Zelda Breath of the Wild. And its whole gambit is that upon setting foot in the sand on the edge of Eventide, you are told that you have grown complacent, if you will, reliant on the tools and items you have scavenged across the entire world, the entire land of Hyrule. And best to simply strip that away and test not your brute strength, but your intelligence, your resourcefulness, if you will, the capability of surviving stranded on an island for X amount of time. Now, what I like about this scenario is that upon a first attempt playing this particular shrine, most people will look at it as, okay, so what is the goal? You don't necessarily have the most distinct idea of what's going on. You know, in part, that there are 3 orbs on the island. 3 Sheikah orbs scattered throughout. And for each of those 3 orbs, there are also 3 pedestals. One on what would be considered each of the 3 corners of this semi-triangular shaped island. And so, your goal is both to discover and utilize what you have to make the most of this situation. So, as a result of all of this, having everything stripped away, you're left with your runes and your brains. That's it. And so, I personally think this is actually one of the best shrines in all of Breath of the Wild. And it's not even remotely close in my mind. See, when we're talking about the types of shrines out there, there's a few that stand out to be sure. You have your combat shrines, the minor, moderate, and major tests of strength. You have the more puzzle-based shrines, like the ones where you have a series of switches to hit and figure out how this item moves in just such a way. But the best of them are typically ones that test how you think and work around the problem. Think of the what is it? The pilgrimage, where a young Korok is trying to get from point A to point B, trying to get to a shrine on the other side of this massive fog. You can't let the little Korok get too far away because you'll lose track of where to go and how to get to your next location. But you also can't be seen. And so it ends up being a significantly harder shrine just by the virtue of you have to figure out how to make the best of this situation that really doesn't necessarily have an easy solution. Now, what I love about this particular shrine is, as I said, resourcefulness. Head into the jungle, figure out what you can find. Bananas, mushrooms, a couple odds and ends, like a couple lizards, and, the odd crab, for example. All totally reasonable. Weapons available include a couple of steel weapons like a claymore. There's a couple standard traveler's swords. I believe there's a couple bows. There are some spears. There's a lot of options available. But this particular shrine, in my mind, has always been about using maybe not everything that the game throws at you, because let's be real, I'm not, but using the bare minimum to showcase that Link has the capability around solving problems in more unique ways. Starting, of course, with the first of these 3 orbs, the Monster Camp. Now, the Monster Camp orb is probably the easiest of the 3, if I'm being realistic. There are 3 monsters, 3 Bokos, guarding a singular treasure chest, an orb, and a barrel. Nothing super over the top. The barrel, of course, holds a soldier's bow, so it's completely useless to me. But you can run in, steal the treasure, and off you go to the races. That's it for that one. Now, I usually, when I'm playing this particular shrine, or this shrine quest, I should say, tend to take the first orb to the far end of the island. The reason being is because of the 3 orbs, 2 of them are available pretty much anywhere, but one of them, if it is only available up high on a mountain. And reality is I'd like to keep the high on the mountain one with the high on the mountain pedestal home. That was not smart. Okay, chasing down the orb. But as I was getting at, Eventide Island has a lot going for it. The Bokos have access to various weapons, explosives, and there's a little bit more of an emphasis on stealth. And you're, again, left with no gear, no armor, no tools that would be helpful in making that goal a reality. Now, reality is, I'm not the type who is exceptional at any real stealth-type gameplay. Trust me, after playing Metal Gear, that was embarrassing. But what I can say is that understanding the capabilities of Link at any given point in this challenge is gonna be your bread and butter. Now, Eventide is also a tropical location. Keep an eye on the weather at all times while you're doing this. Anytime that the weather is looking not so healthy, you can use metal weapons to your advantage. But maybe not in the way that the game would ordinarily make it out to be. Metal weapons in Breath of the Wild have the capability of drawing down electricity, lightning, during a given storm. And this is going to be one of the tools that is going to be incredibly useful for me. See, I don't have the most overactive amount of solutions that I can use. Bombs will be the basic of basics. I could use some magnesis shenanigans, but generally speaking, that's it. So, using something like the weather to my advantage in a way that I don't think very many people would is, I think, one of the more interesting ways of going about it. Now that the weather has changed, as it tends to fairly early on Eventide, I think it's like a tropical storm that comes through on a regular basis, we can head to the top of this mountain here. The top of this mountain has the second orb and the second orb pedestal. And what I like about this particular one is that there are a lot of metal weapons up here. The first time I ever did it, I got incredibly lucky tackling my opponents and whatnot, simply because, I've got this really easy to use set of tools, and my opponent just happened to be, shocked. And so, using the electrical capabilities of this storm to our advantage, I'll be able to defeat every enemy without necessarily hurting myself too badly. And I personally like that. Because using anything and everything that is possibly available is absolutely the point of this particular challenge. Using giant stones, magnesis, using the weather, using the enemy's actions against them. That's the point. Oh, blue guy's gonna go kabloom. And there he goes, blue guy's down. So we're down to 3 bokoblins, I think? At this moment in time, at least. And the reason I wanted to show off this particular set of circumstances is that, in my mind, this is the peak of using Link's in rather high intelligence in the newer games to the greatest advantage. The bokoblins don't necessarily have the greatest intelligence level out of all the creatures of Hyrule, but they have enough that they'd be able to best Link in a battle at times. As long as Link hasn't been actively planning, sorting, thinking about how to solve whatever comes his way. Yeah, that was close. We're just gonna eat a couple crabs and some nanners and reset. Link's overall intelligence is what wins the day on Eventide. It's never about his raw strength. As it is said, you become Link / the player becomes reliant on the tools and that have pulled him through various challenges throughout the game. And this is a very well-known phenomena. People who are capable of getting further on certain merits, like being capable of gathering incredibly powerful and potent tools, creating dishes and potions necessary to make your character stronger in dire circumstances. That is Link's bread and butter. You take away those few tools that are his bread and butter, well, now you're dealing with something entirely different. And that's, I think, my favorite part about this. It's using the ordinary, the consistent, in extraordinary or unforeseen ways. That's the best way of explaining it. And I think that's great. So, with this being said, we now have... I now technically have to get the giant slab of stone off of the pedestal there. So I'm going to be trying out to handle the... It's not the magnesis trick, it's stasis launching product or items. There we go. Stasis launching is one of those tools that I like, but I often felt was underutilized in part. The reason I like stasis launching is that stasis launching, it makes sense. It stores up energy that Link effectively throws at it, be it physical strength, be it explosive strength, etc., and releases that outward in whatever direction the most recent piece of damage came from. That's great. I think that makes sense. But the thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily... Well, the problem I personally have with it is lack of control. Now, most people will fire an arrow where they want the energy to go, and that's it, right? But for me, that's never really worked. I know that there are people out there who absolutely will obliterate me in Zelda. Their tools and capabilities far outmatch my own. And that's fine. I have no concern about that. I think it's perfectly reasonable that a player can outdo me. But the other option, the, I think, much more reasonable option, is that you can also use magnesis shenanigans to be able to launch this slab of stone a fairly decent distance. See, for those that know, magnesis shenanigans is my fancy way of saying that when you get a metallic object on or under magnesis, you can manipulate it onto a heavy object, something that Link on his own wouldn't be able to move, and something that using magnesis on an object wouldn't be able to move. But the combined force overrides the game's ability to do calculations. And the result is what you see here. Link being able to lift a rock several thousand tons because he always had it in him, he just didn't realize it. He was just too focused on the muscle strain and not focused enough on the little sword he was holding, I'm sure of it. Anyways, so that capability actually allows Link to use certain abilities more or less practically to deal a lot of damage, or in some cases, move large objects relatively easily. There's only one more orb left. This is my least favorite of the three orbs, mostly because it's kinda generic. You are to get it off a Hynox. And the thing is that most of the time, players will either use some method of blowing up the Hynox, fighting it on their terms, or try to shoot the orb off, or stealth your way onto the Hynox's belly, pick it up, and run up the mountain. Whatever option you go with is your prerogative first and foremost. But more than that, it also showcases that there is ways to defeat Hynoxes with incredibly limited tools. This, while it is by far and away my least favorite of the three orbs, is also one that I can't help but say, yeah, this works. And here's why. My point being is that it shows and the incentive to use tools and approach problems from a different lens other than raw strength is exactly why this, among all of the trials and challenges in Breath of the Wild, is easily one of my favorites. Because this one takes the challenge and says, hey, how can I do this slightly differently? How can I do this in a way that doesn't rely on raw strength? I know that peak power Link can absolutely obliterate a Hynox. But I'm not worried about peak power Link. I'm worried about this scrawny little guy on the side of a beach right now. And again, that's entirely the point. I feel like, in many cases, we as gamers get obsessed with getting stronger, with being better than we were yesterday. And yes, 100%, I have that tendency myself. By taking away those tools that make the character, let's say, overpowered, and leaving them with limited inventory, you are effectively saying, hey, I can do this. I don't necessarily think it's the greatest idea, but I can do this. That works. Now, we're going to keep this Hynox from using this log as a tool here. And we're going to steal the wood up from under his feet, because of course we can. And reality is that this blue Hynox, I'm just going to defeat outright. I don't necessarily think I need to, but I figure why not. I haven't actually defeated a Hynox yet in this entire run, and I think it's about time to change that. Speaking of defeating Hynoxes, Lionels, etc., reality of doing big boss battles and whatnot under the limited circumstances that I'm currently in, I feel like playing it safe is by far and away the easiest option. Obviously, avoiding all Lionels, Hinoxes, and other boss encounters would be the easiest way to get around until, of course, it's time to fight the final boss. But there's kind of a secondary problem to talk about with that. And it's that, well, reality speaking, I don't think Link, under my current status, shall we say, is capable of defeating a Lionel properly. Now, that's not to say that it's impossible. I do believe it is possible to defeat a Lionel under the current loadout and setup I have. But why wander into these battles that I feel that I don't actually need to go into? See, I already know outright that I'm going to have to fight the Calamity Ganon Gauntlet. I already know. I have not been able to access any of the 4 Divine Beasts. The closest I got was Divine Beast Vanaboris. And that one I couldn't get into because I didn't have explosive arrows, or couldn't launch them, I should say. So, knowing that, I also know that it is very likely an impossibility that I will be able to handle that I will be able to... It is a very likely possibility that at this point, none of the Divine Beasts or their challenges are actually going to be doable. And that's fine. I can acknowledge that, and quite frankly, I don't think I've ever done a run where I haven't done the Divine Beasts separately. So for me, this is new territory that I'm going into. And in part, I know I'm going to require a lot of prep time. I know that everything I've been putting into making this work is going to come back to help me later. Finding all those little tools, the little odds and ends that are going to make my challenge ever so slightly more reasonable. And so, I know that it is most likely possible to beat most of the Calamity Ganon Gauntlet without weapons. The big thing with it is I'm not sure if Calamity Ganon itself is possible. And that seems like a really silly statement to make. What do you mean, the final boss is going to be the thing that stops you? Quite possibly. So, there's a moment where in the battle against Calamity Ganon, it creates this red shield. And this red shield effectively protects it from all damage except from its own blast, its own energy, its own laser, if you will. And I know that theoretically I should just be able to slap a shield on, bat that away, and off we go to the races. But I don't think there's an option aside from a shield to reflect a Guardian laser. If there is, I'm just currently unaware of it. But, to my knowledge, if there is a way around it, there's going to be 3 solutions. The first would probably be something like the Ancient Armor Set. A armor set devoted to extremely high cost and using various tools, springs, cores, etc. to achieve a certain goal, if you will. That is very much a possibility. Not one that I necessarily want to have to deal with, because that will mean dealing with another blue flame run. But it is something that is a possibility. Second option is a shield of any variety. The shield of any variety, if I have to use one, will come from the Stalnox down in the basement of Hyrule Castle. Again, totally aware of that being a thing. The third option is that there might actually be a way around that red armor, but it's not one that I have ever found a solution for. Anyway, once completing the Korguchide Shrine, you get the blessing. And for a 20-minute run around an island, which for most players their first run should be about 45 to an hour, it's not that bad. 300 gold and or 300 rupees. Oofty, I'm losing my mind. And a brand new, Spirit Ore. Now that we have completed that, let's be real. I've gone through every single region of Hyrule to some degree and kind of poked around and tried to figure out what's the best path, what's the next step, if you will. And I think I've done a pretty good job cleaning out all of the shrines of Hyrule without the need for what I would call conventional weapons. Odds and ends are going to remain untouched basically forever. But that's beside the point. My goal at this point is to go around and kind of do a little bit of a cleanup. Starting with I believe it's in the Jaws of the Dragon or something. It is the Shrine of Courage over by the, it's in Faron Province on the south end. The idea is to bring a scale of Faroche to the Jaws of the Dragon, drop it in a pool of water, and bada bing, bada boom, you're done. Each of the 3 shrines that fell under this particular set of rules included the Shrine of Wisdom, Shrine of Power, Shrine of Courage. The Shrine of Wisdom was probably the hardest of these 3, having to chase down Maedra on a massive region, and, might I also add, was doable even with my limited everything right now, which is not something that I was actually prepared to admit. I thought it was going to be impossible, so hey, learned something that day. But with the current tool set I have, I knew it would be possible to get each of the 3 dragons. It was just a matter of getting high enough. Couple episodes, I think 4-ish episodes ago, I got the scale for Faroche. And so it's officially time for me to deliver that to its final home. And while I'm here, get the last Spirit Orb of this region. And then, starting next week, I'm going to be doing what I'm going to call the cleanup. Every single missed shrine, including moderate and major tests of strength, are going to be challenged, one after another in quick succession. And the goal of this is, to be blunt, just seeing exactly how far we can push completing Breath of the Wild without the use of conventional weapons. Again, I may have to use them for the final battle. But it's not something that I'm exactly gung-ho about. I'm very much on the mindset of, if I do, great. If I don't, even better. And so, knowing that, I'm going to be approaching every single one of these shrines with the goal of beating the game in a more realistic sense. Anyways, if you like what you see, want to see the end of this run, which should be coming fairly soon, drop a like, leave a subscribe, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, have a good one.